So now we've watched the depressing and perhaps even somewhat disturbing story of Oedipus. Let's talk for a little bit about what the Greeks would have gotten out of this. After all, they would have arrived at the theater expecting a religious experience and already knowing a lot of the background of the story. So what was the purpose for the Greeks of keeping this story around for so long? Well, with any story, one good way to figure out what the theme or the message is to ask yourself, what does the main character learn? Because whatever the main character learns is probably what we as the reader or the audience is supposed to learn. So look at Oedipus. Oedipus and his parents both get these prophecies from the gods, and instead of accepting their fate with grace, they decide that they can be stronger than the gods' will, so they try to escape. And of course, by trying to escape, they run right smack into the fate that was intended for them to begin with. So this idea of the gods being in control of everything, that we as frail humans must surrender our will, was a very important concept for the Greeks. The idea that people were limited and that all of the most powerful wisdom and strength that we have is still as nothing compared to the will of the gods. So you take someone like Oedipus, who was this wonderful hero, and he was definitely set up as being an excellent king, a wise ruler, able to solve the riddle of the Sphinx, physically strong, morally caring for his people, and yet even he is living in the middle of this life that the gods have planned for him, and he cannot control those particular events. So we look at the Greeks and realize that people have been struggling for just eons with this question, why do bad things happen to good people? And the answer that the Greeks got from this particular drama, from this play, is that life is tragic and is full of suffering, and that you have to resign yourself that sometimes bad things happen and accept your sorrow with grace, that even the innocent will suffer sometimes, and that what you do is when you're in the middle of this is you gain your wisdom and your honor from accepting your fate and making the best of the life that you've been handed. There's certainly also a little bit of a moral lesson in this play. I mean, you watch the idea of Oedipus has to take personal responsibility for his suffering. It was his own pride in thinking that he could escape the fates that led him directly into his fate. It was his own pride in trusting his ability that he could solve this murder and solve this crime and, get back in favor with the gods that led to a lot of the tragedy. The play pointed out that murder is unacceptable. Oedipus killed this man by the side of the road when he had this fight, that his own temper was part of the downfall of what happened to this family, and that breaches of morality like incest will not go unpunished. You are expected to live a moral life. And so we see that Oedipus, for all of his strengths and his really good qualities as a hero, his own character, personality, and his choices are at least partially, if not totally, to blame for his ultimate downfall. So as we wrap up our study of Oedipus, there's a few things to keep in mind. Remember that these plays were a religious experience for the Greeks. To go to the theater was the equivalent for us of going to a church and hearing a sermon. The characters in the play would act out the things that were important for the Greeks to learn. We see a noble, heroic man who is still subject to the whims of the gods. And what the audience gets to experience is this idea of catharsis, that they can go through all the pain, all the suffering, all the horror, and all the nasty stuff that we see in this play without having to personally experience. They can go to the theater and then leave all of their emotions there. As Mr. Finley described it, the soul vomit is left there at the theater, so they can learn their own lesson without having to go through the suffering themselves.